Shuan Zepata en, Asi Pasonaruk Sing. In September 1868, a group of teenage boys climbed a hill on the outskirts of a Japanese castle town. They were 16 and 17 years old. Trained samurai, members of an elite unit called the White Tiger Corps. From the hilltop, through the smoke of battle, they looked toward their castle. They believed it was on fire. One by one, they drew their blades and ended their own lives. 19 boys died on that hillside in a matter of minutes. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. The castle was never burning. It still stood. The boys had misread the smoke from burning buildings in the town below. One survived, too injured to finish. He lived for decades. Welcome back to Lost Japan, where we uncover the stories behind places and moments that history almost forgot. Today, we're going inside the Boshin War, Japan's brutal 19th century civil war, through the eyes of the one town that refused to accept the new order and nearly destroyed itself in the process. I'm going to take you to a place that most visitors to Japan never reach, a city that has been living in the shadow of one morning in September 1868 ever since, and that, in many ways, still. Aizuwakamatsu sits in a wide mountain basin in Fukushima Prefecture, about 3 hours northwest of Tokyo by bullet train. The Aizu region is ringed by volcanic peaks on all sides. Geographically isolated, a world apart from the political upheaval happening on Japan's coasts in the 1860s. It has always been that way. Aizu developed its own culture, its own traditions, and its own fierce identity, precisely because the mountains kept it separate. The climate is harsh, heavy snowfall in winter, brief summers, and the people historically had a reputation for stubbornness that locals today wear as a badge of honor. At the center of the town stands Tsuruga Castle, the White Crane Castle, a 5-story fortification rebuilt in 1965 after the original was demolished by Meiji government order in 1874. That demolition was itself a statement. The new Japan wanted no monuments to the old, but the town refused to forget. Today, Aizuwakamatsu is a mid-sized city of about 110,000 people. It's known for lacquerware, sake, and the kind of local pride that doesn't fade quietly. The lacquerware tradition, Aizu Nuri dates back over 400 years, introduced by the local lord as a way to support the economy of a region that had few other exports. The sake breweries have been running since the Edo period, taking advantage of the pure mountain snowmelt. Visitors come for the castle, for the samurai neighborhoods, and for the hillside graves of the White Tiger Corps. 19 small headstones on a slope above the city, each one marking a boy who died on the same morning. What they find, Shi Tingwei Chilu Pointo, Juan Huan Dian Episodo, Song Ping Rong Bao Gajing Du Shou Huji Niren Ming Sareru 62 Nian Noshi En, Fan Noming Yun Wofen Ketayi Sunoren Ming. To understand what happened in 1868, you have to understand what Aizu stood for and what it refused to become. The Aizu domain was governed by the Matsudaira clan, a branch of the ruling Tokugawa family, established in Aizu in 1643, and Aizu had one rule above all others, instilled in children from the moment they could speak. It was called the Narimasen Code, Naranu Koto wa Naranu Mono Desu. What must not be done must not be done. No negotiation, no exceptions. Children in Aizu were taught this code in group study sessions, supervised by older boys. They learned it the way children elsewhere might learn a prayer, by repetition, by example, by the understanding that deviation was not a personal failure, but a failure of the entire community. This rigid code produced some of the most disciplined samurai in Japan. Aizu warriors were known across the country. Their loyalty to the Tokugawa shogunate was considered absolute. In 1862, that loyalty was tested. The Tokugawa government asked Matsudaira Katamori, the lord of Aizu, to accept the most dangerous political appointment in Japan, Kyoto Protector. Katamori knew what it meant. Kyoto was a city in chaos, caught between loyalists to the old shogunate and radical reformers who wanted to restore power to the emperor. Accepting the role meant putting Aizu directly in the crossfire of Japan's coming civil war. His advisors urged him to refuse. Katamori accepted anyway. To decline, he said. In the summer of 1868, imperial forces closed in on Aizu from multiple directions. The domain had fewer defenders than its attackers and fewer modern weapons. But surrender was never seriously discussed. The Byakkotai, the White Tiger Corps, was one of several military units raised in this final, desperate mobilization. It was composed entirely of boys aged 16 and 17, the sons of Aizu samurai families. They had drilled and trained for years. This was what they had prepared for. There were roughly 340 boys in the Corps, divided into 20 units. Most were held in reserve. But on September 8, 1868, one unit of 20 found itself separated from the main force during heavy fighting south of the castle. They retreated to Iimori Hill, a raised burial ground outside the city, and looked back toward Tsuruga. What they saw was smoke. Heavy smoke rising over the city. The fighting had set buildings in the lower town ablaze, and from the hill in the chaos and fear and exhaustion of battle, the boys read that smoke as the castle burning. To them, it meant the end. Aizu had fallen. One by one, 19 of the 20 boys drew their short swords and committed seppuku, ritual disembowelment. The 20th, Inuma Sadakichi, was found unconscious, still alive, by a woman from a nearby village who heard the screaming. He was the only one who survived. The castle had not fallen. It would hold for another 2 weeks before Katamori finally surrendered on September 22nd, after a month-long siege, with his food gone and his castle walls crumbling. He surrendered not to save himself, but to stop the killing of the remaining civilians inside. The punishment that followed was severe. Aizu samurai and their families were forced to march through the snow to a barren northern territory, to land that was considered uninhabitable. Many died in the relocation. The survivors were forbidden to return to Aizu for years. Katamori himself survived, stripped of everything. He spent his later years as a caretaker at Nikko Toshogu Shrine, tending the tomb of the very founder of the Tokugawa. Inuma Sadakichi lived until 1931. He was 80 years old when he died, and in all his decades of life, he rarely spoke about what happened on Iimori Hill. When he did, he didn't describe heroism. He described confusion, terror, and an error that couldn't be undone. Today, the graves of the 19 boys are among the most visited sites in Fukushima Prefecture. Every year, on September 22nd, the city holds a memorial ceremony, with residents dressed in Edo period clothing, carrying the old domain's banner through the streets. Tsuruga Castle was torn down by the Meiji government in 1874, sold for scrap. The reconstruction in 1965 used historical records and old photographs. It stands now as a museum, its red-tiled roof the defining image of the city. On Iimori Hill, the graves are lined with incense burners. There is also, incongruously, a stone monument presented by the city of Rome in 1928, a gift from the Italian fascist government, which had become fascinated with the story of the White Tiger Corps as an example of total sacrifice for one's nation. It still stands. Japan has debated what to do with it ever since. Aizuwakamatsu never officially reconciled with Satsuma and Choshu, the domains that led the Meiji Restoration, for over a century. A symbolic reconciliation ceremony was finally held in 2013. The story of Aizuwakamatsu isn't just about a battle lost. It's about what it means to hold a principle so tightly that it becomes indistinguishable from destruction. The Narimasan Code, what must not be done, produced extraordinary loyalty. It also produced 19 dead teenagers on a hillside looking at a castle that wasn't burning. Was Aizu wrong to resist? The historical debate continues in Japan today, but what strikes most visitors to those graves on Iimori Hill isn't ideology. It's age. Those headstones mark boys who were 16 years old. They had barely begun. What do you think? When does loyalty become something else? Let me know in the comments. If this story stayed with you, there are more like it on this channel. Stories from places Japan